And get into the first match we're going to be broadcasting on stream for round number 3. It's Muzzy versus seohyun628. Both these guys are currently 2-0 in the Swiss standings, looking to move up to 3-0 and solidify themselves as some of the front runners in this giant pool of Swiss competitors.
Yeah, but to make himself the front runner, Seohyun's going to have to go up against a titan when it comes to HCT. Muzzy was the #1 points earner in HCT in 2016, and coming into this tournament, he sits as the #1 seed. Once again, most points earned for this season.
Yeah, and you know, Muzzy, he has been a top point earner, but one thing that has eluded him has been that big performance. He's gotten really close multiple times to making it to a championship event, even going so far as to make it to the last call invitational in 2016 because of his point earnings. But he's yet to make it that one extra step that he needs. Is this going to be his time to finally do it? We'll have to see. But going into game number 1, it's going to be on the Jade Spirit Echo Shaman is Muzzy, and Seohyun's going to be playing a Taunt Warrior.
Yeah, and the Taunt Warrior certainly is a deck that is a formidable opponent, pretty much at any step of the way. But Muzzy's deck is well-teched to fight a matchup just like this one. We saw the highlight earlier where it was VCT versus VLPS. And VLPS had a commanding position. It took a great deal of fortune for VCT to win that game. And I suspect we might be in for a similar battle here, as Muzzy's deck is not meant to be a very aggressive deck. It doesn't fall apart at the hinges if you manage to kill a couple of minions early on. This deck is meant for the long haul. The main goal is not only to ramp up your Jades, but also to be able to put them back in your hand at a certain point with Spirit Echo. If he lands those minions on board, behind that card, they'll all come back, and that's way too much value for Seohyun to deal with in that situation. So his major game plan is not only to get in some chip damage, but also race towards that quest progress so that he can try to find those lucky shots at the end of the game.
This is one of the only decks that can bring a quest warrior to fatigue. It can happen. I mean, we saw it earlier in the little clip we saw from that match that you had mentioned. Both these decks sort of have inevitability. It's just the Shaman's inevitability is much more guaranteed, but much, much, much slower.
Yeah, it's much more well-equipped to handle this style of matchup, too. Oftentimes, in the value battles, it's the player who is one step slower that ends up having the advantage. They can take that endgame capability one step further, and that's really what it's about with the late-game positions. Who can dominate the board when it's all said and done?
Yeah, we can take a look at some of the other matches from round number 2. Tavern Hero Kenny, we saw on stream earlier, was able to take on Amnesiac, knocking him down to 0-2, which doesn't necessarily eliminate him, but pretty much so. Even if Amnesiac were to win out from here, he'd be 5-2 with not the greatest of tiebreakers.
Yeah, he's all but
yes
out of the tournament at this stage. A great deal of fortune would be necessary for him to win at this stage.
But getting into this one, Seohyun, well on his way to completing this quest, 2 out of 7 at the moment with some top minions in hand. You really have to hit the ground running in this matchup. You have to get that quest done as soon as possible and start chipping away with that hero power. Basically, the way you kill them is by sort of playing the aggressor in this matchup. Don't give them time to build up those Jades. Don't give them time to play those Spirit Echoes and get the insane amount of value back in their hand.
Which is a tall order for this style of deck. It is not meant to be an aggressive deck. It is meant to simply stave off pressure until that quest point. And that's one of the reasons why it becomes such a difficult matchup, is his game plan simply doesn't match up well versus what Muzzy is trying to do. And so as this game progresses, you'll see things like Seohyun just did, where the 1 chip damage to face from the Stonehill defender. He expects that often to be taken out by the Jade Claw plus the Searing Totem that's on board. So when he makes a play like that, he's accounting for every single point of damage potentially meaning something towards the end of the game. It's a very small thing to look at, but if he's looking at a shot that can be lethal, would Muzzy have been at 10 instead? Those couple points of damage. Those little tiny things can make a big difference.
Alrighty, well, looking forward, Muzzy does have a lot of great plays lined up. Aya is a fantastic card because it's resilient and it also ramps your Jades twofold.
Oh yeah.
So the earlier you can get that out, usually the better, because that just means that your next couple of Jades are going to be huge.
It's about as good as it gets in a matchup like this one. It's a really tough card for seohyun to answer efficiently.
Yeah. This is a player who a lot of times likes to think outside the box. You look at Jade Shaman, it's a deck that, you know, not a lot of people expected, at least this many people, to bring it for this lineup. Muzzy says he prides himself in sort of being hard to predict. Take a listen from his own words.
It's always better to bring decks that you feel are good, that people aren't expecting, because if it's a deck people aren't expecting, they won't know how to play against it when, you know, they're at that point. If they don't have a lot of practice against it, they have a much slower win percentage versus a deck like a similar deck which they've practiced a bunch, or they know the matchups, they know how to mulligan.
And Jade Shaman is one of those decks that not many people have much practice against. One, because just not many people play it in practice in like ladder or rank play. And two, because the matches take so long.
Oh, yeah.
Nobody wants to sit down and jam out 50 games of Jade Shaman, because that's going to take you a week.
It's a good point to note. The difference between building a tournament lineup and competing on ladder are very different things. Muzzy very much known for his competitive play on ladder. But in an environment like this, you have to think outside the box a lot of times.
Yeah.
You're playing against other world-class players. Where do you find your edge? It's likely in those deck choices.
He said a couple points of win percentage is what separates bringing an unexpected deck that people can't practice against versus, you know, maybe a more, you know, tried and true deck that people do know how to play against. And those are the edges that you need. Those couple percentage points towards winning is what separates you from going 6-1 to 4-3 in a switch stage like this. And Muzzy's a player, so I've been sort of in a team chat with Muzzy for a long time. GNC, Grand National Champions. It's not as active anymore as it once was, but whenever there's a question about anything Hearthstone related, like a mechanic, like how a card works in a certain situation, what card do you need to put to tech against this type of deck, any Hearthstone related question, everybody would always direct it at Muzzy. That's how much he plays Hearthstone, and that's how much he knows about Hearthstone, is that he is the go-to person for almost everybody I know for weird things that can happen, because he's the one that's experimenting, he's the one that's trying these things out, and he's the one that knows all that stuff.
That's right. And seohyun, while this is his first appearance on the Hearthstone Championship Tour, he's no stranger to the game. His fastest road to legend was all the way back in August of 2014. 154 games it took him to get there. But just as recently as February this year, 177 games to get to legend. To do that, he had 63.3% on Aggro Druid, which is not found in his lineup, and he had a 60.4% win rate with Quest Rogue, which is in his lineup. We've been seeing a lot of players shy away from the aggressive decks in this particular tournament.
Yeah. Which
Thus far, the decks that have targeted those strategies have fallen by the wayside.
We'll see. In this matchup, I think seohyun has a little bit of an advantage because of the fact that he has Jade Druid and Quest Rogue versus some of the slower strategies that Muzzy has. Those decks are going to pick apart the Shaman. Those decks are going to pick apart the Paladin. Those decks are going to pick apart the Warrior.
You may not be getting against the Shaman again, though. This game has been an uphill battle at every stage of the way. He's made quite a lot of quest progress, but Muzzy has ramped his Jades very early on. He's got a very strong hand to back this up. He's got extra card draw if he wants it available. And seohyun's just simply having to make sacrifices to try to get something going on board. And turn after turn, Muzzy has just built up a bigger and bigger advantage. Every single time.
6-6 Jades already on turn 7. That's impressive Jade ramping.
It is very tough for seohyun to come back in a situation like this. Even though Primordial Drake is setting up Sleep with the Fishes in the coming turns, the thing about it is Muzzy's resources are generating twofold at this point. They're pulling cards away from seohyun, and then they're also killing those cards that are on the board and delivering the threat of damage at the same time. So every single turn, seohyun's had to expend resources to try to get past these points, and Muzzy just continues to rack up resource after resource. Now, the problem with Muzzy's hand is if it comes to a point where all he's got left is removal, that's totally fine for seohyun, because his goal is to win via the quest progress. So you're going to see Muzzy do things like use Hex right now. He probably anticipates a card like Sleep with the Fishes. But this extra damage right now is very relevant to Muzzy's overall game plan.
Yeah, it really is. If you can force a warrior into the back foot and you can force them to be the one to play defensively, all of a sudden they miss one of those rag shots once that quest is complete, you kill them.
Yeah.
It's not a matter of them not being able to kill you quick enough. It's a matter of them not being able to live long enough. Ooh, second-rate bruiser.
Fills out the curve very nicely.
Yeah.
At this stage, Seohyun's just looking to find himself a brawl and take care of this board. He does have 2 copies. I'm sorry, he's only got 1 copy of Brawl in his deck, and that's something that we've also seen as a trend in this tournament. A lot of players moving towards the 1 Brawl. But right now, that is the card that he needs to get this board under control.
Is he going to devolve mostly to be able to push damage, but also to deny the card draw?
And that's a lot of damage that's coming across.
Oh, yeah. 16 points of damage coming at you. And this really sort of dissuades Seohyun from playing the Soul Frost because you give up your armor up. Play the Soul Frost, and like I mentioned, you swing with that bad boy, and you miss your hero power shot onto one of those key minions.
Yeah, this would have been a great time for Seohyun to also have a whirlwind effect available to him. We've seen Muzzy turn after turn apply so much pressure. It's forced those tools from Seohyun. Now that he's drawn his second sleep with the fishes, he has no way to clear out this board alongside those. These are going to act more as single target style removal spells right now.
Admirable, he's pretty dead.
He's pretty gosh darn dead.
What now?
No way to activate Battle Rage effectively. Harrison's hasn't found a target.
Got to be Brawl.
No dice. First sleep is pretty decent. The second one, not so much. And it looks like Seohyun is desperate at this point to get things under control. And if that does not hit that 5/5, he's in for a world of hurt here.
So he's at 2 health, effectively.
Now, the one thing about that is that Muzzy actually doesn't have a lot of burst damage outright in the deck. There's a second copy of Jade Lightning, and there's a second copy of Jade Claws. Outside of that, it has to be minion combat that gets that job done. Apologies, 1 Lightning Bolt as well.
That 1 of Lightning Bolt. Also a Volcano if there were to be a Bittertide Hydra on the board.
Or an
Also
Abomination.
Abomination. Just 2 points of damage. Actually goes ahead and picks up Thing from Below with Spirit Echo is, I don't even know a word for it, immense?
That's a good word for it. It's a lot of extra value you buy when you're able to land the cheap cost Thing from Belows and then also the Spirit Echo on top of it. Not that we are at the point of the game where Muzzy needs that to win, but you could see why this is such a difficult matchup, even if Seohyun was able to effectively answer what Muzzy had thrown at him. If his life total was stable, you would still be looking at an additional 10 or 11 minions that Seohyun would have to get through prior to having a stable board position.
Yeah, and this will almost certainly spell the game. There's no way he's getting through all of this, plus finding a way to win at 2 health. And he's not going to even try. Seohyun concedes. Muzzy takes game number 1. The Jade Shaman showing why a lot of players did bring this deck.
You mentioned, though, this is where things can get tough for Muzzy. The Jade Druid plus the Quest Rogue are preying on lineups like Muzzy's.
Yeah. Yeah, Muzzy, we've talked about sort of his storied career with HGT points and earning those. Top point earner from 2016, top point earner from this season as well. One of the most popular grinders in the game, and a guy that a lot of people go to when they need advice on Hearthstone or on ladder decks. But that one win from HGT has eluded him. Every time he gets to that big stage, he comes up a little bit short. And is it him just choking on the big stage, or is it him just not getting the cuts that he needs? We actually had a chance to sit down with Muzzy and talk to him about his experience in HGT over the past couple years. So take a look. Hello everybody, welcome back to the Hearthstone Championship Tour. This weekend, it's time for the America's Winter Playoffs. I'm gonna go ahead and reveal my picks here. First off, my favorite is Muzzy. Muzzy's been a top point earner in the Americas region for some time, but he's always, had those choking moments on the big stage.
I don't know. I've been at that point where I was like so close to, qualifying or winning an event, and I've lost like almost every time.
Muzzy has a bit of a reputation as a choke artist, and unfortunately that is just kind of true.
People say, oh, why hasn't Muzzy won this yet? If he's such a good player, why hasn't he qualified for this yet?
Muzzy genuinely is one of the most accomplished players in the game. He's yet to prove it in a competitive manner, but he does have this reputation of letting nerves and emotions just overtake him.
I'm pretty confident when I play it. I don't think I'm nervous at all. I think I played decently well. I have like justification on what I did every turn. I've explained it to other people and they've understood me, so I don't think it was me choking.
We know how good a player he is. The only thing holding Muzzy back historically has been Muzzy.
This is just an absolute destruction for Muzzy here.
I was one step away, like again, and it just feels so bad.
Man, poor Muzzy.
But it's happened every time, so we'll see what happens this time, right? So if I do qualify, it'll sort of silence those people and it'll take a lot of weight off my shoulders. Yeah, it'll make me feel really, really good.
Muzzy is going to shed his choke artist status as fast as Sottle shed his ponytail.
A couple years.
It was instant. He just got to cut right off.
Oh, I see what you mean. I was thinking to grow the ponytail.
Oh, no,
also.
no. And then Muzzy is going to donate his choke artist status to charity.
Great pickup for anyone in that situation. That's what you leave me with.
The look,
That's your toss-over
the
to
look
me.
that Admirable gave me, I wish you guys could have seen, was a look of sheer confusion. But there's Muzzy on your screen there. You can see just sort of his bio there and a little bit of information about him. But, I mean, he's rearing and ready to go. You heard in his interview, he's not really nervous. I mean, at this point, he's played in these HCT events so many times. And, that one time when you have to just take the pressure off yourself and realize, hey, if I lose, I'm in the exact same position I was every other time in HCT. If I win, I'm just proving everybody wrong. Just take the pressure off your shoulders. Just play some Hearthstone.
I think a lot of it has been misconstrued as nerves in the past because Muzzy has made some choices that don't quite seem right in the situation. But I've talked with Muzzy at the last few team events he's been on, part of Luminosity Gaming alongside Zalay and Chalky. And I've played some games with him on ladder as well. Right at the turn of the Ungoro metagame, I sat down with Muzzy and we just simply talked about Murloc Paladin. And hearing his thought process in combat and watching him navigate through turns, he wasn't just simply thinking one turn ahead or this turn. He's looking 4 or 5 turns down the line sometimes. And he'll explain it, how the combat will roll out and what he anticipates from his opponent. And he'll end up in a more favorable situation because of some of the odd-looking choices that he's made. He's a very brilliant player, and when you see him do something a little bit strange, look down the line and see what could possibly be there, because that's likely where his thought process is.
Yeah, we'll see. Jumping into game number 2 here, Muzzy on the Miracle Rogue. So a deck that not a lot of players brought, but a few more, I believe, in the Americas than we saw last week in Europe, at least in different lineups than we saw it in last week. Muzzy's running a very similar lineup to lineups that we saw earlier in the day, like Chalky's and Amnesiac, except this Rogue is a little bit of a different choice than what they were running.
And this is a deck that Muzzy is incredibly comfortable on. He's played so many Rogue games that I've seen that it's really unbelievable. And one of the things I think that fits Muzzy very well about this style of deck is that it has turns where it can play things a little bit slower and look for better situations. And it has turns where it can really crank on the pressure and start to take those aggressive stances. And that's one of the things that Muzzy is absolutely best at, is recognizing where that moment of peril is and when he has to get going immediately. And this matchup is largely going to boil down to how much minion pressure he can actually stick to the board. His minions are fairly weak with the removal that Seohyun has. Cards like Wrath and Swipe line up very well against things like SI7 Agent or Gadgetzan Auctioneer. So his major goal, a minion just like this one that Seohyun cannot immediately react to start chipping away some damage and getting 2 minions on board to make it more difficult for Seohyun to remove them both in the same turn.
And also generates resources that are unaccounted for. A lot of times rogues, one of the reasons why they still call it Miracle Rogue is because it can do some crazy things. With Gadgetzan Auctioneer. But not only that, now they have cards, Hallucination, Shaku the Collector. All these things, can generate crazy amounts of resources that your opponent can't account for.
I can tell you right now, if Muzzy would have been able to account for this particular pickup, he likely would have been sending that Shaku straight to seohyun's face. That claw would have allowed him to use SI7 agent to clear the additional Jade card. And so it's little things like that can make a big difference in this game. Suddenly, Swipe will clear both of these minions if seohyun chooses to do so.
Yeah. I mean, that's not really something that you can hope for. I mean,
It's not something I would account for.
yeah, I think the attack is correct.
Oh, absolutely. I do definitely think it's correct. But it's
It's just funny how it works out that way.
those are the little things to look for in Muzzy's spot. How often can he stick 2 minions to the board rather than just 1?
Unless seohyun wants to expend and innervate here, he will have a turn where he's not developing that much. And he's actually just going to forego the swipe. And he's just going to go with the hero power into the Shaku. Not too worried about the SI7 agent, considering it could just get eaten by the Tar Creeper.
And I think this is a wise choice. Feral Rage is a card that seohyun very much wants to use to stabilize his life total rather than to simply remove a minion. And with Sherazin drawn, that's one of the best cards that Muzzy could have seen right now, because as I mentioned, sticking 2 minions to the board is very difficult, but now Muzzy's got 2 counterfeit coins, he's got preparation, he's got gadgets in Auctioneer. This is about to be an explosive turn for Muzzy if he finds any gas behind this.
He's about to, as the kids say these days, pop off, Admirable.
Yeah.
I got the best deals anywhere.
This is a lot of cards Muzzy's about to draw.
And he gets 2 extra mana, and seohyun just sort of reels his head back.
Second
knows.
preparation found.
Second preparation. This is going to be his whole deck.
This is a lot of cards.
I mean, he could basically res Sherazin twice, and an Arcane Giant to back all of these spells up.
There's an Eviscerate, that's a big one. Fandral is a major threat to what Muzzy's trying to do. So when he finds that answer straight away, that's going to take a lot of pressure
Wow.
off of him to stick minions to the board. Suddenly he's got 3, and seohyun has almost no way to contest these.
What a turn. What a turn.
It does not get much better than that.
No. And he's got the Vilespine Slayer to be able to take out a big minion if Primordial Drake were to come down. Arcane Giant is already at 4 mana on turn 6.
Yeah,
So if he's just able to launch out a couple more spells, he's going to be in a great position. He's going to be able to play the Arcane Giant for almost free. Edwin Van Cleef even picked up.
his hand is loaded at the moment. Backstab, no help immediately, but there's a second Auctioneer waiting. Muzzy has plenty of ways to take care of these board positions. And this is where he's got to be a little bit careful, is Primordial Drake is a very tough card for this deck to deal with. So the goal for Muzzy is to set up the quickest lethal possible behind the first Vilespine Slayer. If that first Vilespine Slayer is able to force a tremendous amount of damage, there's almost no way seohyun recovers from that. That's the one thing Druid really struggles with, is any amount of overwhelming pressure. They need to go card for card on the board. When they can't do that, that's where the deck tends to fall apart.
Yeah, and Muzzy knows that it's going into Primordial Drake turn, so he's trying to set up a board that's the best possible into it. And so he doesn't leave the Sherazin at 2 health and try and get through that Tar Creeper with Eviscerate. He just develops the Arcane Giant, doesn't try and like cheat it out for free a few turns down the line, just presents the threats.
4 mana 8/8 sounds pretty good to me.
It does. You know, a 3 mana 4/4, that also sounds pretty good to me. Not quite as good as a 3 mana 12/12,
I'll take it.
but I will take it also.
And seohyun knows he's in danger here. Primordial Drake certainly provides a lot of defensive pressure against this, but since Muzzy's drawn so many cards, Vilespine Slayer's at the forefront of his mind.
Yeah.
How does he get out of a situation like this? Looks to me like you hope Muzzy doesn't have it. And frankly, I think that's the right game plan. If Muzzy has any way to get through this, you're just going to take too much damage to survive.
Yeah. So this is interesting. Muzzy now, I think, has a way to get through this Primordial Drake without using Vilespine Slayer, if he so chooses. He can go Questing Adventurer, Blood Mage Thalnos, Backstab Eviscerate, which would res the Sherazin Corpse Flower, and leave him with a Vilespine Slayer in hand. to be able to get through the next big threat should it come down.
And that is exactly the direction he's headed, and wisely so. Once again, Seohyun doesn't have cards in his deck that handle this style of pressure. This is the turn where Muzzy has driven the nail into the coffin.
Yeah.
Blood Mage was such a fantastic card this turn, and Sherazin did a heap of a job carrying this game. The way it contested the Tar Creeper, the way it's come back on this turn to seal the deal completely, even with 16 extra life in hand, Seohyun, it's a matter of time.
Yeah. Second Primordial Drake will just get eaten up by the Vilespine Slayer. I mean, second Primordial Drake will just get run over by the Arcane Giant, and then 2 cards would need to have been played in hand for even just the Sherazin plus the Questing Adventure to kill him. So he's looking at that saying, I'm very, very likely dead if I play that. Is there any way that I can survive long enough to maybe get a train rolling? And he's mousing over all his cards, looking for a miracle, but I don't see one.
Yeah, it's not quite Miracle Druid.
I mean,
At times,
Miracle Druid used to exist, and it still runs Gadgetzan Auctioneer. So sometimes it can do some crazy things. But Seohyun just goes ahead and concedes. Muzzy goes up to a 2-0 lead in this series for round number 3. The winner of this match moves up to 3-0, which again puts him as one of the front runners through these Swiss phases. And Seohyun,
he was.
the 1,000-yard stare. That's what that was.
He looked a little bit uncomfortable towards the end of that game.
Yeah.
Like wondering, what could I have done to really put myself in a winning position in this one? Muzzy just had about the best turn 6 that you can imagine with that deck. And when you just get steamrolled by not only a bad matchup, but also a strong hand from your opponent, now you have to win 3 straight. The feeling's not good in that situation. I've been there.
Yeah. Now, Miracle Rogue can get run down, and it does suffer from sometimes, being inconsistent. If you draw those cards out of order, all of a sudden you're stuck with a hand that's pretty much dead. But the one thing that Miracle Rogue does do is sort of just take wins from you. Whether you get a big Van Cleef early because you had double counterfeit coin Van Cleef on turn 1, whether you have that Auctioneer double coin prep on 6. Those types of things are, they happen enough to where it sort of brings up the consistency level of the deck naturally, despite it having those hands where it's not that great. So Miracle Rogue is sort of a sleeper deck of this tournament where we have these huge control lineups that give it a bunch of time, and we'll see. Yeah, here's 2 other matches that are happening around the rest of the Swiss portion of this event in round 3. Joester, who played at, I believe, the Spring Championship of 2016, maybe Summer, versus Nagudan, who we saw earlier on stream. They're both 1-1, and then Dog and Doc Pone playing another pretty intense match going on over there. They're both 1-1, and Dog's trying to navigate his way around that Dragon Priest against Jades, but those Jades look like that's all 11-11 and a 12-12, I think.
They were very
Jeez.
large Jades, and this is a critical round for all 4 of those players. Getting that second loss early on really affects your tiebreakers as the tournament progresses.
Yeah.
The better opponents that you play against, the better that your tiebreakers are. And so when you're playing against players that already have 2 losses at that stage, it can really mean the difference coming down to that 8th and 9th place spot.
Yeah.
So a second loss early on for any of those players is going to spell trouble. That is a must-win round for everyone that you just saw.
Yeah, if you're going to lose in Swiss, you want to lose towards the end because that means that you'll have been playing against players with similar good records as you throughout the beginning of the event, so you're more likely to have those good tiebreakers later on. So got to take a nod towards those matches being important. So Seohyun still with the 1,000-yard stare. He's just like, oh man, this is not going well for me.
That's where victory seems to be when you're in that position. He lost 2 very quick games. They were both in decisive fashion. And he's against one of America's most renowned players with Muzzy. And this is his first Hearthstone Championship Tour appearance.
And Muzzy's just like, is it round 7 yet, guys?
Muzzy's a pretty chill guy.
He is. He's very chill. Yeah.
He's always super relaxed.
He said one of the things that he likes doing just as much as Hearthstone is sleeping.
Yeah.
He actually doesn't, to be honest, when he's at events, he doesn't do much sleeping.
He's too excited.
He's too excited and he wants to play too much Hearthstone.
He's focused.
Yeah. Muzzy is also a full-time student, and somehow he manages to play more Hearthstone games than everybody else and be a full-time student.
At DreamHack Austin, as the event was coming to a close, it was the last day of the season for a lot of those players. Muzzy was one of those guys sitting at the table playing Hearthstone games rather than enjoying post-event ceremonies with the rest of his friends. And as rightfully so, a lot of his friends were doing the same. This is a guy who takes competition very seriously, and he wants to find himself that big win.
And at the same time, he was mentioning throughout the weekend that he had an essay due on Monday. Which I don't think he got done. So he was up all night on Sunday trying to do that essay because he was playing too much Hearthstone that weekend, trying to get those points to qualify for this very event.
Frankly, I don't know how you complete a 50-word essay by that time.
A 50-word essay?
Maybe 200. I don't know. Quest Warrior versus Jade Druid. This is more the matchup that seohyun is looking for. It's one of the decks that he's trying to prey on that Muzzy has. Again, with the Gunther Mage, with Quest Rogue, with Jade Druid. All of these decks perform fairly well versus Quest Warrior. The problem with this is that he's dropped 2 games early on. So even if he's a 60% favorite over the next 3 games, Muzzy's still a favorite to take the matchup. So in this one, he's simply looking to ramp the Jades out of control as quickly as possible, and then rely on cards like Gadgetzin Auctioneer and Nourish to find more Jade stuff to pile on top of this. This Acolyte that Muzzy's coined out, however, has thrown a little bit of a wrench in this plan. Suddenly it forces seohyun to take one of 2 roads. Number 1, use a Feral Rage early on and delay his development, or number 2, yield more cards over to Muzzy. So that disruptive play could play a critical role in this one. If Muzzy gets to the late game safe enough, those rag shots can end the game very quickly.
Bring the pain. Yes. Gets me every time.
A lot of ramp found for seohyun, but again, that early Acolyte has really disrupted this. And a second Acolyte of Pain threatens to do the same thing. Does he want to use a second Feral Rage here? Does he want to get Jade Spirit going? Either way you look at this, Muzzy is gaining something that's very critical to the matchup when he's making these plays.
Yeah, very true. He will have that lack of card draw down the road, but at the moment he's not really worried about that. He's worried about trying to stall the ramp, both Jade and mana, from seohyun.
Look at the difference from game number 1, where Muzzy was on the Jade deck. And by this stage, we were looking at 3/3 Jades. Aya Blackpaw hit the board very quickly.
He had 6/6 Jades by turn 7, which doesn't always happen. Actually, it very rarely happens.
seohyun was overcome by that Jade pressure. Muzzy, he's sitting pretty.
Second Feral Rage used to clear off this Acolyte of Pain.
And frankly, I think this is right. It's just a difficult position to freely give Muzzy that many extra cards. And now the one thing that Muzzy is suffering from is a lack of taunt minions to play. He's drawn now both of his Sleep with the Fishes, and he does have 2 copies of Brawl in the deck. So there is a lot of cards that are simply dedicated to wide board pressure.
The Stubborn Gastropod.
I'm looking at that Tarlord.
Yeah, me too. I just wanted to say Stubborn Gastropod. Stubborn Gastropod, when Taunt Warrior was first starting to become a thing, people were trying out low-curve Quest Warrior decks to try and complete the quest as quick as possible, and not necessarily to have valuable taunt minions that you could also complete pretty quickly. And so they're just jamming in Stubborn Gastropods, Goldshire Footmans, and other low-cost taunts. Yeah, I can't even think of any other low-cost taunts right now.
Public Defender.
Public Defender.
I actually did play with that list, and it was not very good. It was great in the mirror. It was just terrible versus anything that had 3/3s.
Yeah.
It's not a good spot to be in.
3/3 is just the bane of that low-curve Quest Warrior deck, but
It certainly was. This is the first sign of seohyun having any Jade pressure whatsoever. So he still has a strong hand behind this. Aya Blackpaw and the double Jade Blossom will give him a lot of minion pressure going forward. But the big issue is it soon enough? Muzzy is moving towards that Tarlord turn, which is a big stabilizing point for him. He's at a very safe life total. He hasn't made a lot of quest progress, though. That's definitely something to keep an eye on.
oh yeah. Dirty Rat can do some work, though. Dirty Rat pulls out a Jade card. All of a sudden, you're taking away some of that Jade ramp that they can have. Pulls out Auctioneer. As long as you can remove it right away, you ruin a lot of that engine that the Druid can have. A lot of great targets for Dirty Rat.
Dirty Rat's a card we've seen a lot of players cut from the Quest Warrior deck as well. It's a tool that functions very well in the mirror matchup. It's not the greatest tool against aggressive decks, and that's one of the reasons why you've seen so many players cut it recently, is aggro decks were clearly on a lot of people's radars in terms of what they expected the opposition to bring.
It's also not a great card against. It feels like a lot of Paladin decks it's not great against. Mage you can get punished because there's minions that you can pull out that immediately punish you.
Oh yeah.
Tyrion, Archmage Antonidas. Whew, that's a real bummer. Even if it pulls out like an Alex Straza or a Medivh, that's a 7/7 and 8/8. Those are cards that you don't want on the board.
I like the Eye of Blackpaw here from seohyun. He just needs to get as much pressure going as quickly as possible. But those ramp cards have been in his hand, and we're going into his turn 7 next.
Yeah, Muzzy's early play is really forced him to that awkward position where he was forced to either choose between ramping Jades or ramping mana, or building threats or ramping mana. I don't know, this one's, I still feel like this one's gonna come down to the wire. Muzzy has still not drawn anywhere near enough taunts to be able to finish his quest. And seohyun, once he does get to that large mana threshold, he's gonna be able to draw with Wild Growth. Maybe by that time he'll have picked up a Gadgetzan Auctioneer. His Jades are starting to get rolling with double Jade Blossom plus the Aya. His Jades are effectively at 4/4 if he were to play Jade Blossom this turn.
Yeah, and Earthen Scales is actually a pretty significant draw this turn as well. It allows him to get past the Direhorn Matriarch and keep the Aya on board. So both of those things working very much in seohyun's favor at this point. One of the most troublesome things Muzzy's going to have is when he clear the board, but has to deal with stuff living behind it. Does have Whirlwind, does have Sleep with the Fishes. This is a very nice looking turn, however.
But how do you do it the most efficiently?
That is the million-dollar question, as always.
It might be a turn for a brawl.
Wow.
No minions.
That's not the situation Muzzy wanted to see. He wanted to see some Jade card come out of seohyun's hand there. But that is a big read to Muzzy at this stage.
You saw a glimpse down there of round number 3, Watt, who made it into the top 8 in the winter season and was one game away from making it to the Bahamas. Actually moved up to 3-0 in the Swiss standings. And Watt, he's been known to bring some weird deck choices. He had Reno Priest, who made it to the top 8 last time.
3 Reno decks.
Yeah, and now this time he's got some weird decks as well. He's got Elise, the Trailblazer, in an aggro Paladin deck, which is super bizarre. But he's 3-0, so it's working.
Look at this. Muzzy going to hang on to his Whirlwind in that spot. He had a great Whirlwind setup, but his game plan in this spot is to have a way to activate Execute and then use that second Sleep with the Fishes the following turn. This is a matchup where Sleep with the Fishes is not super effective. And so when he can hang onto that card, have this Dirty Rat soak up a lot of damage, and then follow up with that, he can continue to protect his life total and still have Execute for later down the road. The only problem with this is that seohyun had Swipe in hand. I think Muzzy was expecting Swipe to be used quite a while back if it would have been there. And now he's facing a lot of pressure on board.
Yeah, he does have a way to deal with it. He can still go with that plan that you mentioned during the last turn. Or he can play Tarlord.
Tarlord seems pretty good to me.
Tarlord, of course, one letter off Star-Lord.
Very important facet of the card.
Also, one letter off Tarlordy.
Another very important nugget from TJ.
The Gluttonous Ooze picked up. I love Gluttonous Ooze.
Such a good card.
It really is. seohyun opted to go with the Gluttonous Ooze over the Harrison Jones. Comes out earlier, more flexible. Weapon removal has a lot of value right now because even mages with Medivh the Guardian run weapons. Paladins are rampant weapons.
Yeah, favoring the extra life, that's largely as a nod to a deck like Pirate Warrior, where destroying an Arcanite Reaper and gaining 5 extra health paramount to your success. But in this matchup, he would much rather have the cards. And that's the thing he's starved on right now. His Jades are very large, but the Tarlord is a massive wall to what seohyun's trying to do. Whoa. And he doesn't have any card draw left. So now seohyun is looking almost exactly for Nourish. Gadgetzan Auctioneer wouldn't be enough at the moment because he doesn't have any other spells in hand. So this is a fantastic position for Muzzy, and exactly the spot that he's typically looking for in this game.
He still needs some taunt gas, though. Draws the Direhorn Matriarch, which is the biggest taunt minion in his deck at the moment. But seohyun, all of a sudden, if he does draw a Nourish, he's likely to pick up either more card draw tools or more Jade Idols, which means his Jade Idols are already at 7/7, which is quite large. And as soon as those Jade Idols, if you, as the Druid player, can get your Jade Idols out of range of the 8 damage from the Sulfuras hero power, then you're putting yourself in a great position to sort of overwhelm the warrior, not really allow them many opportunities to come back in the game.
That's exactly the reason why Muzzy's been hanging on to those executes as well. He knows that at the moment's notice, things could go awry for him, and he's actually just going to brawl here.
I mean, if he wins this brawl, it'd be insane. Oh my goodness.
My gosh, TJ, that is a huge outcome. And Muzzy,
Yikes.
even Muzzy looks like he couldn't believe it.
He was tugging at his collar.
Smile.
He's like, ooh, this is
That is a miracle outcome for Muzzy. seohyun put all of his eggs in that one basket, and the lack of card draw this game is now a massive detriment.
Yikes. Muzzy getting closer to completing the quest, and at the moment, he has control of the board, which is insane, considering how his opening hand had panned out. That brawl did some work.
seohyun needs to find Nourish in this spot. Jade Idol, it's certainly making some big stuff, but Muzzy's got some big stuff in the way.
Yeah.
If he finds a Stonehill Defender in this next draw, you are looking at
Battle
lights
range.
out. And that's big. That's another reason why Muzzy's been hanging on to this Whirlwind, is to pick up that extra
3
card.
cards plus the execute activated.
And there's multiple taunts. Muzzy just pulled
Wow.
so far ahead.
Insane. Wow. And we can take a look at Muzzy's reaction to the brawl. Watching me like pulls on the collar a little bit. It's like, I won that brawl. This is awkward.
Wow.
Little smile. He's like,
Sometimes.
this is what winning feels like.
Muzzy actually chose not to execute on the previous turn. He just went with Curator to thin the deck, and it's actually kind of a curious play. I mean, just getting another big body on board. Effectively the same thing as using Execute in this spot, because he could have just simply preserved the 6-power body, but at this stage of the game, not really sure it makes any difference. Muzzy is at an incredibly safe life total. seohyun just drew the worst card in his deck,
Yeah.
and Sulfuras is online. This is looking like a 3-stock for Muzzy.
Yeah. And I think you're guaranteeing that damage to face. You're going for it. seohyun, the 1,000-yard stare may be back.
I mean, you mentioned popping off, but that's another horrid card for seohyun. Throws the well played, 3-0 start for Muzzy in American Spring Playoffs.
I need some of the youngsters to come and tell me what the next stage of popping off is, the next evolution.
I don't know. I'm way too old for that.
Someone will tell me. Yeah, Muzzy, an impressive start. Not only the 3-0 in Swiss, but also the 3-0 match to get him there over seohyun. And looking at their matchups at the beginning of that match, I didn't know really who to give it to. I saw seohyun's decks and had a ton of good matchups against the Warrior, and I was worried. He's got Jade Druid, got Quest Rogue, got the Gunther Mage. All good matchups against the Warrior, and so I was a little bit worried, but Muzzy took 3-0.
He kind of just came out on the wrong side of the matchups. Was the first snowballing point for him, running his Quest Warrior into Muzzy's Spirit Echo Shaman. Not the matchup he's looking for in that one. He wants his more aggressively tailored decks that can get the ball rolling a bit sooner to match up against that one. Keep the pressure on Muzzy to be using tools defensively the whole game, rather than simply playing for value. And from there, it was just all Muzzy the entire time.
Yeah, impressive performance. Let's go ahead and check in.